The cup hit her chest before she even saw it coming. Scalding coffee splashed across her apron, the bitter smell filling the air as gasps rippled through the diner. For a moment, everything froze. The sound of the espresso machine hissed in the background, the jukebox fell silent, and every pair of eyes turned toward the man standing at the counter. Red-faced, furious, and gripping the empty cup like it had betrayed him. "You call this coffee?" he barked. "It tastes like mud. I've had better in a gas station." The cashier, a young woman named Danielle, blinked through the sting of the hot liquid, her breath trembling. Her name tag, half soaked, still hung crooked on her chest. She didn't cry. Not yet. She'd learned a long time ago that crying only made them angrier. I'm sorry, sir," she whispered. "I can make you another—" "Forget it," he snapped. "You people don't even care about your jobs anymore." The diner manager, an older man named Frank, hurried over, his towel still slung over one shoulder. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to calm down." But the customer, mid-40s, sharp suit, polished watch, turned his glare on Frank. "Calm down? I'm a paying customer. She can't even get an order right." "Do you know who I am?" A murmur spread through the room. A few regulars shifted uncomfortably in their booths. Danielle stood frozen, her hands trembling, her apron dripping. She wasn't thinking about his name or his watch. She was thinking about the burn spreading across her skin, and the way humiliation always felt hotter than the coffee. Frank clenched his jaw. "Sir, I think it's best if you leave," the man smirked, grabbed his phone, and muttered something under his breath. Something about posting this dump online and getting people fired. He tossed a crumpled 20 on the counter and stormed out. The bell above the door jangling violently behind him. Danielle just stood there. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the towel Frank handed her. "You okay, kid?" Frank asked softly. She nodded. But the truth was, she wasn't. She'd been working double shifts for weeks, saving every tip for her brother's school tuition. She'd dealt with rude customers before, but not like that. Not the kind that made everyone look away instead of helping. When she finally went to the break room, she stared at herself in the mirror. Cheeks flushed, eyes glassy, apron stained dark brown. "Don't cry," she whispered. "He's not worth it." But she cried anyway, quietly. The kind of cry that comes from exhaustion more than pain. Hours passed. The dinner rush came and went. The storm outside began to fade, and the diner slowly emptied until only the hum of the refrigerator remained. Danielle cleaned the counter for what felt like the 100th time, her movements robotic. She just wanted to go home. Then she saw it, a black leather wallet, left sitting on the edge of the counter, half hidden under a napkin. She frowned, picking it up with a cautious hand. It was heavy, expensive, the kind of wallet she'd never own. Inside was a driver's license. Ethan Cole, age 44, business executive. Address uptown. Her heart gave a small, conflicted flutter. It was him. The man who'd humiliated her. The man who'd thrown coffee on her and stormed out like a king leaving his castle. For a second, she thought about tossing it in the lost and found box. Or maybe, just maybe, the trash. But something stopped her. Maybe it was her conscience. Maybe it was how her mother raised her. Maybe it was that quiet, stubborn part of her that refused to let his cruelty make her cruel too. She set the wallet aside, planning to turn it in to the police in the morning. But she couldn't shake the thought. The sheer irony of it all, he'd thrown his coffee. Now he'd lost something worth more than all the tips she'd make this week. And somewhere out there, she imagined him tearing his car apart, searching frantically, realizing the world had a strange way of evening things out. She didn't know it yet. But by morning, that wallet would change everything. Not just for him, but for her, too. The rain hadn't stopped since he left the diner. Ethan Cole gripped the steering wheel tighter, his jaw clenched as he drove through the storm-soaked streets. Every red light felt personal, like the universe was deliberately slowing him down. He had meetings in the morning. Clients who didn't take excuses. A reputation built on control, precision, power. And tonight, he'd lost control. Over a cup of coffee. He cursed under his breath. Stupid kid didn't even know how to use a machine. But the words rang hollow now. They didn't echo with the same conviction they had an hour ago when he'd been the loudest man in that diner. Now, sitting in his luxury car, he just felt small. The kind of small no money could fix. The GPS chimed as he turned into his gated neighborhood. He reached for his wallet to scan the security pass. Nothing. He patted his jacket pocket. Then the other. Then the glove compartment. A cold shiver crawled up his spine. He pulled over under the awning of his driveway, rain drumming against the windshield, and tore through the car. Floor mats, briefcase under the seat. Nothing. No wallet, no ID, no credit cards, no. No, 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 he muttered, his heartbeat picking up. He dumped the contents of his bag across the passenger seat. Receipts, files, pens, everything except the one thing he needed. Then it hit him. The counter. He must have left it there, right before he stormed out. The image of the diner flashed in his mind. The fluorescent lights, the smell of burnt coffee, the waitress's face when the cup hit her chest. Her eyes, the shock, the hurt. The way the entire diner had gone dead silent. He ran a hand through his hair and exhaled shakily. God, he muttered. What did I do? It wasn't just the embarrassment of losing a wallet. It was what it meant. Every card in there, his driver's license, his corporate ID, his house key card, his cash, everything screamed who he was. And now, the one person who had every right to hate him held it. He thought about calling the diner. But what would he even say? Hi, I'm the guy who threw scalding coffee at your cashier. Any chance you found my wallet? No, he couldn't. Pride wouldn't let him. He paced his kitchen, rain dripping from his coat, the silence pressing in heavy. In his head, he could still hear her voice, soft, trembling, still polite even when humiliated. I can make you another... He'd ignored it. He'd walked out like she was beneath him, and now he was the one left empty-handed. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not frustration, shame. He sat down at his marble counter, staring at the reflection of himself in the dark window. His perfect home, his expensive suit, his miserable face. When had he become this man? The one who measured worth by tips and titles? He thought of his father who'd once told him, "Respect isn't earned by money, son. It's earned by moments." Back then, Ethan thought it was just something old men said before they died. Now it felt like a warning he'd ignored too long. He tried to sleep, but couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the look on the waitress's face. Not anger, not revenge, just hurt. The kind that lingers. By dawn, he was back in his car. The rain had stopped, but the street still glistened with puddles that reflected the rising sun. He parked outside the diner, his chest tight. Through the fogged glass, he could see her, Danielle, wiping the counter again. Same apron, same quiet grace. It hit him that this was just another morning for her, while for him it was a reckoning. He took a deep breath and stepped out. The bell above the diner door jingled as he walked in. Heads turned. A couple of regulars recognized him from last night. Their eyes narrowed, lips whispering. Danielle froze behind the counter, the cloth in her hand pausing mid-wipe. She looked up slowly, and there he was. The man who'd humiliated her in front of everyone. Her eyes flicked to his jacket, then to his hands. Empty. No cup, no anger, just hesitation. He took a step forward. I think I left something here. Her tone was calm but cool. You mean your wallet? His throat tightened. Yeah. She reached under the counter, pulled it out, and set it down between them, but didn't push it toward him. It just sat there, like a barrier. The same distance that had always existed between people like him and people like her. You forgot it after you left, she said quietly. I was going to turn it in. He swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the wallet but unable to reach for it. There were a dozen things he wanted to say. A dozen excuses, half apologies, explanations, all of them useless. Finally, his voice cracked. I'm sorry, she didn't respond. Not right away. She just studied him. Really studied him. The way someone does when they're deciding whether to forgive or forget. After a long pause, she said softly, it's just coffee, but they both knew it wasn't. He nodded slowly. I know. He reached for the wallet, but before his fingers touched it, she added, next time you yell at someone, remember, we're just trying to get through the day, same as you. That hit harder than anything she could have thrown. He nodded again, more firmly this time. You're right. He took the wallet, but left a folded envelope under it. She frowned as he turned to leave. Sir! But he was already pushing through the door, the morning sunlight spilling in behind him. When she opened the envelope, her breath caught. Inside was a check, more than she'd make in 6 months, and a short note in neat handwriting for the coffee. And the reminder, thank you, EC. By noon, the diner's parking lot was packed. It started with one phone, a teenager in the corner booth, recording because he thought something might happen. And it did. The video hit social media by sunrise, a man in a $1,000 suit shouting at a diner cashier, a cup thrown, a woman flinching, the sound of glass hitting tile, and then silence. In less than 6 hours, it had 1 million views. By 9 a.m., Danielle didn't even know her name was trending. She was busy refilling coffee cups, pretending not to notice the whispers. Is that her? The one from the video? Poor thing. Her manager had offered to send her home, but she refused. People like me don't get to hide, she said quietly. We just keep working. Still, every time the bell above the door jingled, her heart jumped. She didn't want sympathy. She wanted normal, but normal was gone. Across town, Ethan Cole's office felt like a war zone. Reporters had camped outside the glass doors. His assistant's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Every PR firm in the city had left messages: damage control, crisis management, reputation repair. On the news channel, playing silently in the corner of his office, a panel of anchors discussed him like he wasn't real. CEO of Cole Financial caught on camera assaulting a service worker. Another example of privilege unchecked. Will the board force him to resign? He muted the screen, rubbed his temples, and whispered, God, what did I do? His phone buzzed. It was a text from his sister. Saw the video. You need to fix this fast. He wanted to. But how do you fix something like that? A statement wouldn't do it. A donation wouldn't erase it. The internet didn't want words. It wanted accountability. For hours, Ethan sat in silence. The guilt gnawed at him until there was only one thought left. She deserves to hear from me. Again. That evening, the diner was quieter than usual. Most customers came not for food, but to stare, to confirm that the woman from the viral video was real. Danielle moved like a shadow behind the counter, polite but distant. Her co-workers shielded her when they could. The bell above the door jingled. Again, a hush fell. He walked in. Same man, same suit, but something was different. His posture, his eyes, his silence. The manager stepped forward. Sir, you can't. It's okay, Danielle said softly. Let him. Every pair of eyes followed him as he walked to the counter. He didn't bring cameras. He didn't bring lawyers. Just a small box in his hands. He set it on the counter. I know I'm the last person you want to see, he began, voice shaking. But I needed to say something. Not online, not through a PR statement. Here. Danielle said nothing. The rain outside started again, tapping gently against the windows. He took a breath. I don't deserve forgiveness. But you deserve to know the truth. I wasn't angry at you. I was angry at everything else. My job, my life, myself. And you were the easiest target. He swallowed hard. That's not an excuse. That's a confession. He opened the box. Inside was a simple pendant, a silver coffee cup charm on a delicate chain. It's not much, he said quietly. But I wanted you to have it. A reminder that what happened doesn't define you, or me if I'm lucky. Danielle looked at it, then at him. There were no cameras now, no audience, no applause. Just two people standing in the wreckage of one terrible moment, trying to rebuild something human. She reached for the box. You really didn't have to. I did, he said quickly. Because last night, when I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't recognize the man I saw. But I think, his voice cracked, I think if my dad were still alive, he'd tell me to come here and face what I broke. Her eyes softened. Just a little. You did, he blinked, confused. What? You faced it, she said quietly. That's more than most people ever do. The words hit him harder than he expected. He nodded, stepped back, and turned toward the door. But before he left, she said something that made him stop. You forgot your wallet again. He froze, then laughed softly this time. The tension broke for the first time in 2 days. He turned, smiled, and said, Keep it safe for me? She smiled back faintly. Always. By morning, a new video hit the internet. This one wasn't posted by a stranger. It was from a security camera. Silent footage showing the man returning, talking quietly to the waitress leaving the box. No yelling. No performance. Just accountability. The caption read, Sometimes people change, if you let them. The internet went wild again. But this time not with hate. With hope. Thousands of comments poured in. Finally, a real apology. That's how you do it. Faith in humanity. Restored. And Danielle? She never replied to a single comment. She just came in the next morning, brewed coffee, and smiled when the bell above the door rang. Because some stories don't end with revenge. They end with grace. 3 days passed. The diner returned to its old rhythm. Mostly. Coffee pots hissed. Forks clinked. The same old regulars told the same old stories. But beneath it all, something had shifted. The corner booth, the one where that man had stood shouting only days before, now sat empty, like the air itself refused to hold that memory. And yet every time Danielle passed it, her eyes drifted there, not in fear anymore. In reflection, forgiveness she'd learned isn't loud. It's quiet. Like a heartbeat finally slowing down after a storm. That night, rain fell again. Danielle was closing up when she noticed something outside. A familiar car parked under the flickering streetlight. Her stomach twisted. Not fear, just curiosity. And maybe something else she couldn't name. He was sitting in the driver's seat, head bowed, a takeout container in his lap. For a moment, she almost went back inside. Then she sighed, grabbed her umbrella, and stepped out into the rain. The pavement glistened, every drop catching the glow of the diner's neon sign. She tapped lightly on the car window. Ethan startled, then rolled it down. Didn't mean to freak you out, he said, managing a faint smile. I just couldn't drive home. Danielle tilted her head. Rough day? He laughed softly, though a tired sound. Rough week, month, life maybe. She hesitated, then nodded toward the diner. We close in 10 minutes. But if you don't mind helping me stack chairs, there's still some pie left. He blinked. You'd let me come in? After everything? Yeah, she said. Because I'm guessing you haven't eaten much since that video went up. That was true. His face said it before his mouth did. He got out of the car, followed her inside, shoulders hunched against the rain. Inside, the diner felt smaller now, warmer. The lights were dimmed, the air smelled of cinnamon and coffee, and for the first time, they were alone. No cameras, no whispers. Danielle slid a plate across the counter. Apple or cherry? Dealer's choice, he said, voice quiet. Cherry it is. She cut 2 slices and poured 2 cups of coffee, one for him, one for her. It was the same table where it all started, the same floor still faintly stained by that cup he'd thrown. He noticed her hands, the small scar near her wrist. Did I? She shook her head. No, this one's from a broken plate a few years back, but thanks for asking. They ate in silence for a while, the rain tapping softly against the windows like distant applause. Finally, he said, I don't remember much about that day, just the sound of the cup hitting the counter, the way everyone looked at me after. It was like watching myself from outside my body. That's usually how shame works, she said gently. You see the damage before you feel it. He nodded slowly. I deserved everything that came after. Maybe, she said. But you also showed up. Twice. That's more than most people do. He studied her for a moment, unsure how someone he'd humiliated could show such grace. How do you do that? He asked finally. What? Forgive. She smiled faintly. It's not about letting you off the hook. It's about letting myself breathe again. For a moment, neither spoke. Just rain, coffee, quiet. Then Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. "There's something I wanted to give you," he said. "It's not charity. Not guilt either. It's something I should have done long before I ever met you." He slid it across the table. The envelope was thick, sealed with a faint, embossed logo, Cole Foundation. She hesitated. "What is it?" He took a breath. "A letter. And a check. But don't open it now. Please, just when you're ready." "Why?" "Because I need to leave before you see what's inside." She frowned. "You're not making this sound less suspicious." He chuckled softly, eyes tired but warm. "I know, but I mean it. Read it when you're home." Danielle studied him, the way his shoulders no longer carried that arrogant weight, how his eyes seemed clearer now, almost humbled. "All right," she said finally. "I'll wait." He nodded, stood, and reached into his pocket again, pulling out a folded receipt. "This was yours," he said, "the day it happened. You never closed out my check. I figured I still owed you." She took it, eyes softening. "You really didn't have to." "Yeah," he said, smiling faintly. "But maybe I did." After he left, Danielle locked up the diner, turned off the lights, and stood by the window for a moment, watching his car disappear down the wet street. Something about the rain tonight felt different. Not heavy, not cold. Just cleansing. When she finally made it home, she set her purse down and pulled the envelope from her coat pocket. For a long moment, she just stared at it, fingers trembling slightly. Then she broke the seal. Inside was a typed letter and a cashier's check. She unfolded the letter first. "Danielle, I don't expect forgiveness, but I do owe you truth. My mother worked at a diner like yours. She raised me on her feet, double shifts, burnt hands. I lost her when I was 23, heart attack at work. I never showed up for her funeral. I was too busy being important. You reminded me of her that day, the way you stood your ground even when I tried to break you. I saw her strength in you, and I hated myself for it. This check isn't payment. It's a partnership. I'm setting up a fund, the Alma Grant Foundation, named after her. To cover health care for food service workers across this city, you'll find your name listed as co-founder. You didn't just change my week. You changed my life. Ethan Cole." Danielle's breath caught. She stared at the check. 6 figures, neatly signed, dated today. For a long time, she just sat there, tears spilling quietly down her cheeks. Not from shock, from something deeper. Peace. The next morning, when the bell above the diner door rang again, she smiled. Truly smiled, for the first time in weeks. Sometimes redemption doesn't come from grand gestures. Sometimes it comes from one man sitting across from you in the quiet after the storm, finally learning how to be human again. 2 weeks later, the diner felt lighter. It wasn't just the new coat of paint or the steady hum of laughter returning to its booths. It was something else. Something you couldn't quite name but could feel. Ever since the letter, everything seemed to change. Quietly, beautifully, Ethan had done exactly what he promised. The Alma Grant Foundation went public within days, with Danielle listed beside him as co-founder. News stations picked up the story. Businessman turns viral shame into life-changing charity. The footage of him handing her the first donation check went viral, but this time for the right reasons. No coffee, no shouting, just gratitude. Danielle didn't expect fame. She didn't even want it. She still showed up every morning before sunrise, brewed the first pot, and wiped down the counter before the regulars arrived. But people came from all over now, truckers, nurses, teachers, all wanting to eat at the diner that forgiveness built. And while she smiled through every handshake, every photo, "You're an inspiration, Miss Danielle," she sometimes caught herself glancing at the door, wondering if Ethan would walk in again. He hadn't since that night. Not once. He'd kept his distance, maybe on purpose. Maybe because he knew some chapters are better closed quietly. Still, she missed the peace of that conversation. The stillness between two people who'd hurt and healed in the same breath. It was a cold Wednesday afternoon when the next storm rolled in. And with it, someone new. The bell above the door chimed. and Danielle looked up to see an older woman standing there, drenched and shivering, clutching a worn leather purse. Her clothes were plain, but her eyes were sharp, the kind of eyes that had seen too much of life to be fooled by smiles. "Welcome in," Danielle said, drying her hands. "You can take any booth you like. Coffee?" The woman hesitated, scanning the room. Then she whispered, "You're Danielle, aren't you?" "From the news." Danielle smiled softly. "Guilty as charged." The woman nodded slowly, stepping closer. "I've been looking for you." That sentence stopped Danielle cold. "For me? Why?" The woman sat at the counter, folding her trembling hands together. "It's about Ethan Cole." The air seemed to change, heavier, quieter. Even the clock on the wall felt louder. Danielle blinked, slowly setting the coffee pot down. "What about him?" The woman took a deep breath. "He used my mother's name for that foundation. Alma Grant. But my mother, she wasn't his." Danielle froze. "I'm sorry, what?" The woman reached into her purse and pulled out a small, weathered photograph. A younger version of herself stood beside an older woman, smiling, apron on, in front of a small-town diner that looked heartbreakingly familiar. "That's my mom," she said. Her name was Alma Grant. She ran a diner just like this one. "I grew up watching her work herself to the bone." Danielle's heart thudded. "And you're saying Ethan used her name," the woman finished. "Without ever knowing her. Without asking me. I saw it on the news and it shook me. Because I thought for a second maybe there was a reason." Danielle frowned, confusion mixing with unease. "Did your mother ever know someone named Cole?" The woman's lips trembled. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." The diner grew quiet as the storm howled outside. Danielle leaned closer. "He told me his mother's name was Alma, too. That she'd died when he was young." The woman looked down at her hands. "Funny thing is, my mom used to tell me about a boy she once looked after. Said he'd come into her diner alone, sometimes bruised up, sometimes hungry. She'd feed him when she could, slip him pie when her boss wasn't looking." Danielle's breath caught. "She never said his name?" "No," the woman whispered. "Just that she called him her little gentleman." Lightning cracked outside, the sound sharp, electric. Danielle's mind raced. Could it be? Could Ethan have named the foundation not out of guilt, but remembrance? A tribute not to his own mother, but to the woman who'd shown him kindness when no one else did? The woman pulled another folded paper from her purse, a letter old and yellowed. "I found this tucked in one of Mom's recipe books after she passed," she said. "It's from that boy. He never signed it, but maybe you'll recognize something." Danielle took it gently, unfolding the fragile paper. "Dear Miss Alma, I don't know how to thank you. You said someday I'd grow into a man who gives back what he's been given. I didn't believe you, but maybe I do now. You gave me pie when I didn't have a home and kindness when I didn't deserve it. If I ever become somebody, I'll name something after you. Because you were the first person who ever looked at me and saw something worth saving." The boy who spilled his milk but kept his promise. Danielle's throat closed. Her eyes blurred. She didn't need a signature. She didn't need proof. She knew. It was him. Ethan, the boy who'd once been broken, now unknowingly keeping a promise made decades ago. The older woman sniffled softly, her voice trembling. "So you think he meant it? As a tribute?" Danielle nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I do. I think your mom saved him once, and he's been trying to repay her ever since." The woman exhaled shakily, covering her mouth. "She always said kindness echoes. I never thought it could echo this far." Danielle smiled through her tears. "It did, and it's still echoing now." That night, after the storm died, Danielle sat alone at the counter with her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold. She thought of Ethan, the lost boy, the angry man, the humbled soul. And of Alma, a woman long gone but never forgotten. Her kindness still rewriting lives decades later. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through her messages, and found Ethan's contact. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. Then she typed one line, "I met Alma's daughter tonight. I think your promise just found its way home." She hit send. And for the first time in a long, long while, she smiled. Not because something ended, but because something had finally come full circle. The message had been sent for hours before he replied. Danielle had nearly convinced herself he wouldn't, that maybe Ethan had moved on for good. Buried in boardrooms and interviews, his name back in headlines that didn't sting anymore. But then, just after midnight, her phone buzzed. One line, simple, raw. I need to see you. There's something I never told you. She read it twice before her heart caught up. Outside, rain tapped against the diner windows, soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat that didn't know whether to race or rest. She typed back before she could think. Diners open, always. By the time the bell above the door chimed, the clock had already crept past 1 in the morning. The diner was empty, save for the low hum of the neon sign flickering outside and the faint smell of brewed coffee clinging to the air. Ethan stood in the doorway, soaked again, as if every time fate dragged him back here, it had to be in the middle of a storm. But this time he didn't look haunted. He looked tired. Coffee? Danielle asked gently, already pouring. He nodded. Always. When she slid the mug across, their fingers brushed, and it was enough to pull all the words neither had said rushing back to the surface. I met someone, she said softly. A woman. She said her mother's name was Alma Grant. Ethan froze mid-sip, the mug stopping inches from his lips. Danielle continued. She showed me a letter from a boy who promised to name something after her. The handwriting, Ethan, it was yours. He exhaled shakily, setting the mug down. I was wondering when that would find me. He leaned back, running a hand over his face, like he'd been carrying this secret for too long. When I was about 9, he began, I used to hide behind a diner near the old steel mill. My mom had left by then. My dad was... He paused, swallowing hard. He wasn't around much either. So I'd wait there behind the trash bins, hoping they'd throw something out I could eat. Danielle said nothing, just listened, her eyes soft. Steady. One day, Ethan continued, the owner caught me. I thought she'd call the cops. Instead, she made me sit at a booth, gave me a slice of pie and said, if you're gonna eat here, you're gonna eat like you belong here. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. She called me little gentleman, always made me sit up straight, always made me finish my vegetables before dessert. She didn't know my name. I didn't know hers, not until I saw her name tag one day. Alma. Danielle's chest tightened. She was the first person, he said quietly. Whoever treated me like I mattered. He took a shaky breath, eyes fixed on the steam rising from his coffee. One night, I told her I wanted to grow up and own a diner just like hers. She laughed. Said I'd do something bigger. I told her if I ever did, I'd name something after her. A promise from a hungry kid with syrup on his chin. Danielle's eyes glistened. You kept it, he nodded slowly. I tried to. But I didn't even know if she was real anymore. I searched for her years later, nothing. So when I started the foundation, it just felt right. Like honoring the only person who ever looked at me and saw more than the mess I was. He finally met Danielle's eyes. Until that day, the day I threw coffee at you, when I saw your name tag and it said Danny. I don't know what happened. I saw that same look in your eyes, the same patience, the same disappointment. I realized I'd become the man I used to be afraid of. Danielle's throat burned. And you came back. Yeah, he whispered. Because I couldn't let the last thing Alma's kindness created be another man who forgot how to be decent. The rain eased into silence. The world outside seemed to pause. Danielle studied him for a long moment, then reached across the counter, resting her hand over his. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that says everything words can't. You didn't just honor her, she said softly. You became her promise. Ethan laughed under his breath, shaking his head. Funny. I thought I came here tonight to confess. Turns out maybe I came to remember. They sat like that for a while. Two people bound not by blood, but by the ripple of one woman's kindness decades earlier. Finally, Ethan slid something across the counter. An envelope, sealed and slightly damp from the rain. "What's this?" Danielle asked. He smiled faintly. The second part of the promise. She opened it, unfolding the paper inside. Effective immediately, 51% ownership of the Alma Grant Foundation will be transferred to Danielle Harper. Because the promise wasn't just to give back, it was to pass it on. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. "Ethan, I can't—" "Yes," he said gently, "you can. You already have." He stood, sliding his jacket back on. "You once told me forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It rewrites it. I think that's what this is." Danielle wiped her tears, managing a small smile. "So what now?" He looked out the window, the rain finally clearing, the first streaks of dawn breaking over the lot. "Now," he said quietly. "Now I think I finally go home." She nodded. "You already did." And for the first time in a long, long while, Ethan Cole, the man who once drowned in his own mistakes, walked out of the diner lighter than he'd ever been. As the door closed behind him, the bell chimed once, a soft, echoing note that felt less like an ending and more like a promise keeping itself. Morning came slow. Rain clouds drifted apart like curtains being drawn, and the pale gold of sunrise slid across the diner's windows. Danielle stood by the counter, wiping down the same coffee mug for the fourth time, but her thoughts were miles away. The seat where Ethan had sat still carried the faintest trace of warmth. His half-empty mug, the damp envelope he'd left behind, they all felt like echoes of something sacred, something that had happened between two strangers who no longer were. She turned the mug absently, staring at the small chip along the rim. Funny how imperfections could make something real. She wondered if people were the same way. The bell above the door jingled softly. It wasn't Ethan this time. It was Mrs. Kellerman, the elderly woman who ran the antique shop across the street. She'd been coming to the diner for years, always ordering the same thing, hot tea, no sugar, lemon on the side. But today, her face looked different, pensive, a little pale. "Morning." "Mrs. K," Danielle greeted, setting the mug aside. "You're out early." The woman smiled faintly, her eyes glancing at the rain-streaked window. "Had a feeling I'd find you here, dear." She reached into her purse, pulling out a folded newspaper clipping and a small cardboard box tied with twine. "This came in with a box of old estate donations last week. I didn't realize what it was until last night." She set the items on the counter, her hand trembling slightly. "I think it belongs to you." Danielle frowned, untying the twine. Inside was a small metal tin, the kind used for baked goods, with a faded label across the top that read, "For the gentleman who never stopped believing." Her stomach flipped. "What is this?" Mrs. Kellerman pushed the newspaper forward. "Look at the date." Danielle did. March 12, 1997. The headline read, "Local diner owner closes doors after 42 years of service." The photo beneath it showed a familiar face, warm eyes, silver curls pinned neatly back, Alma Grant, smiling under a hand-painted sign that said, "Home is served here." The article went on to describe how Alma had retired after decades of serving the community, with one odd little note at the end. Before leaving, Mrs. Grant baked one final pie and told her staff, "It's not for sale. It's for the boy who never said goodbye." Danielle's breath caught. Her hands shook as she opened the tin. Inside, perfectly preserved under a wax seal, was a handwritten recipe card, stained, yellowed, and faintly smelling of cinnamon. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Apple crumble pie for my little gentleman. If he ever comes back, tell him kindness doesn't expire. It just waits." Alma G. Danielle covered her mouth, her eyes filling fast. She traced the shaky pen strokes, imagining Alma's hands writing those very words decades ago, waiting for a boy who had finally, unknowingly, found his way back. "Mrs. K," she whispered. "Where did you find this?" The old woman smiled softly. "In a box marked unclaimed, but honey, looks like it finally found who it was meant for." Danielle blinked through her tears. "He has to see this." An hour later, she was in her car, that tin on the passenger seat beside her, the smell of old paper and cinnamon filling the air. The clouds had cleared completely now, leaving the sky a soft wash of pink and gold. She didn't even know where she was driving until she saw it, the road leading up to the hill overlooking the town. A small sign read, Alma Grant Foundation. Her breath hitched. She pulled over by the gates, heart pounding. The building beyond was sleek and modern, but the bronze plaque near the entrance shimmered with a familiar warmth. In honor of Alma Grant, who taught us that no kindness is ever wasted. Danielle walked to the door, holding the tin close. The receptionist looked up, startled. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Danielle said softly, steadying her voice. "This belongs to Mr. Ethan Cole. Tell him it's about Alma." Minutes later, Ethan appeared down the hallway, jacket off, sleeves rolled, still looking half like a man rebuilding his life and half like one still learning how to live in it. When he saw Danielle standing there holding the tin, his face softened. "You found me faster than I expected," she smiled through her tears. "I had help." She handed him the tin. "This was waiting for you." Ethan took it carefully, almost reverently. When he read the label, something inside him broke. His eyes shimmered, his hands trembled, and for a long time he couldn't speak. Finally, he whispered, "She remembered me." Danielle's voice was barely audible. All this time, he lifted the lid, reading the note inside. Every word seemed to pull him back through the years, to a small booth, a chipped cup, the smell of apple pie and kindness. "She said it waited for me," he murmured, voice cracking, and it did. "Through everything," Danielle wiped at her eyes. "I think she always knew you'd come back." Ethan laughed softly, shaking his head. "No, she just believed I'd need a reason to." He took the recipe card out and held it to his chest. "You know," he said, his voice trembling, "I've built buildings, signed deals worth millions, but nothing ever felt like this." Danielle smiled through her tears. "Then maybe it's time to build something that does." He looked up at her, eyes wet but bright. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, gesturing to the foundation behind him, "this was her legacy. Maybe now it's yours. And maybe this time it starts with a diner, not a skyscraper." Ethan stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "A diner," he repeated. "Named after the woman who gave a hungry boy his first slice of pie." Danielle smiled. "And maybe," she added softly, "there's room for one more name on that sign." He looked at her, realizing what she meant, and his expression softened into something unguarded, unpolished, real. "Yeah," he said, "there should be." That evening, as the sun dipped low, Ethan stood outside what was once Alma's diner. The windows were boarded up, the paint faded, but the bones were still there. He ran a hand along the wood, and for a moment, he could almost hear her voice again. "If you're going to eat here, you're going to eat like you belong here." He smiled, blinking away the tears. "Guess I'm home, Alma." Behind him, Danielle leaned against the car, arms folded, watching him. "So," she said with a small grin, "what's the plan?" He turned to her, eyes steady. "We bring it back, just the way she'd want it, a place where kindness waits for whoever needs it." And with that, he picked up a hammer, drove the first nail into the new sign, and whispered, "For Alma." 6 months later, the smell of cinnamon and coffee drifted through Main Street again. The Grant and Cole diner stood where Alma's had once been, not shiny, not sterile, but alive. The old neon sign had been restored, the letters glowing a soft amber against the evening sky. Beneath it, in smaller print, a new line had been added: "Kindness served daily." Inside, everything felt familiar. The red leather booths, the checkered floors, even the chipped mug Danielle had insisted on keeping behind the counter. But there was new life here, too. The jukebox had been repaired, the menu rewritten, and laughter had returned, like it had just been waiting outside for permission to come home. Danielle stood behind the counter, wearing Alma's old apron, the one embroidered with tiny daisies. Ethan was across the room, tightening a frame on the wall, a photograph of Alma standing beside her original diner in 1984, smiling that same no-nonsense smile that seemed to dare the world to try being cruel in her presence. "You hung it straight this time," Danielle teased. Ethan looked over his shoulder, smiling. "Practice makes perfect. You've been saying that every time it tilts," he chuckled. "Then I guess we're in for a lifetime of practice." Danielle rolled her eyes, but she couldn't hide the grin tugging at her lips. There was something about seeing Ethan like this, grounded, laughing, lighter, that filled her chest with a quiet kind of pride. He wasn't the same man who'd stormed into her diner months ago, tired and hollow behind a designer suit. This version of him, wearing rolled-up sleeves and a small smear of flour on his wrist, was the man Alma must have seen in that little boy decades ago. At precisely 5 p.m., the open sign flicked on. The first customers came in slow, cautious, like people peeking into a memory. Old regulars who'd once sat at Alma's counter now shuffled back in, blinking in disbelief. "Lord," one elderly man whispered. "It smells just like it used to." "It's the pie," Danielle said from behind the counter. "Same recipe. Only one difference. This time it's made with love and a little too much butter." The man laughed, tears in his eyes. That's the way she'd want it. Word spread fast. Within the hour, the diner was packed. Families, couples, teenagers, even construction workers from the new site across town, all gathered, drawn by something they couldn't name but instantly recognized. Kindness had a way of making itself known like that. Ethan moved from table to table, shaking hands, thanking people for coming. When he reached an older woman sitting alone by the window, he stopped. Her hair was white, her eyes soft, and in her lap sat a faded photo of a young boy holding a slice of pie. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Is that—" The woman smiled, voice trembling. "That's you, isn't it? You were the boy from the paper. The one Alma fed when you had nothing but holes in your shoes." Ethan blinked, the air catching in his throat. "You remember that?" "Child, everyone in this town remembers that. She talked about you like you were her own. Said one day you'd make her proud." The woman wiped her eyes. "And look at you now. You brought her back." Ethan didn't trust himself to speak. He just nodded, eyes glistening. Then he reached across the table, gently took her hand, and said softly, "No, ma'am. She brought me back." As the night went on, music filled the diner. Soft, slow jazz, the kind Alma used to hum along to. Plates clattered, coffee poured, laughter rolled like distant thunder. Then Danielle stepped out from the kitchen, holding a single pie tin. "All right, folks," she announced. "Tonight's the first batch of Alma's apple crumble. But this first slice," she glanced at Ethan, smiling, "isn't for sale." The room quieted. Ethan froze as she crossed the diner and set the plate in front of him. One perfect slice of pie, golden crust, steam curling up like memory itself. Danielle placed a small folded card beside it. "Found that in the recipe box last week." "I think she meant it for tonight." He unfolded it slowly, his heart pounding. The ink was faded, but the message was clear. "If this pie ever makes it back to my counter, that means kindness won. Don't waste it, pass it on." Alma Ethan's throat tightened. He couldn't stop the tears this time, not that he tried to. He looked up at Danielle, his voice breaking. She knew. Somehow she knew. Danielle smiled through her own tears. "Maybe kindness just has a better memory than we do." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "Guess I'll have to make sure it doesn't forget." She nodded. "You already have." Outside, the sky turned from gold to navy, the streetlights humming to life. Through the big front window, people could see the neon sign glowing against the dark. Grant and Cole Diner, a symbol not of business, but of belonging, and as the camera, or story lens, pans back, through the laughter, through the soft glow of the lights, it lands one last time on the photograph hanging by the counter. Alma Grant. Beneath it, a small plaque reads, "For every hungry soul who ever needed a place to rest, and for every stranger who remembered to be kind." Next to it hangs another frame, a picture taken just that morning. Ethan and Danielle standing side by side, aprons dusted with flour, smiles wide and unguarded. Between them, the counter gleams, and on it sits a single apple pie. Steam rising in quiet tribute to the woman who started it all. Later that night, after the last customer left and the chairs were turned upside down on tables, Ethan lingered at the counter. The diner was silent now, save for the ticking of the old clock. He reached for the same chipped mug Danielle had kept and poured himself a little coffee. "Alma," he said softly into the stillness, "I hope you're seeing this." "Because you were right. Kindness doesn't expire." He looked toward the window where the neon light reflected faintly on the glass. For a moment, it almost looked like someone was standing there, smiling, arms folded, proud. Then the image faded into the reflection of the sign, and Ethan smiled. He took a sip from the mug, turned off the lights, and whispered before leaving, "Thank you for waiting."